Hello, welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is Friday, August 9th. Hopefully everybody's having a good day so far. Apologies if it doesn't seem like I'm in my usual setup. I'm actually out of town right now, but I will be back to recap this game in my normal studio, and we'll have a ton of content, more daily content coming out next week once I get back into the full swing of things here. But I wanted to get into New York Jets, Washington Commanders preseason preview, as the Jets will take on the Commanders tomorrow afternoon at MetLife Stadium for game number 1 of the preseason schedule and the first preview here of the 2024 season. While it is just preseason, still previewing a game, getting to see live football over the last couple days. Yesterday, starting the preseason game, of course, Hall of Fame game last week, plus getting to see the Jets out there tomorrow at MetLife Stadium in the afternoon. It's still football. Even though it's preseason, doesn't mean a whole lot. You know, sometimes those games get, they're not the most exciting things to watch. It is still football at the end of the day. I want to break down this game, want to break down what to watch for, some players to watch for, some position battles, and everything else here that we need to go get through to head into tomorrow's game. Now, before we begin, I want to quickly tell you about our podcast partners, starting with our friends over at SeatGeek. SeatGeek is an app that delivers tickets from all over the internet and puts it into one spot to make it easier for you, the buyer. What makes SeatGeek so great is they rate each ticket on a scale from 1 to 10, so you know what type of deal you are getting. Green means good, yellow means okay, red means stay away. Plus, my viewers, use promo code BUBSONSPORTS for $20 off your purchase. Click the link in the description down below to download the SeatGeek app. And again, use promo code BUBSONSPORTS for $20 off your purchase. If you want last-second tickets to the Jets-Commanders game, this is the place to get them. There are some great deals going on to get some great seats to watch some live football for the first time here in 2024. So definitely check those out. Bubs on Sports for $20 off your purchase. Also, my friends over at Huga House. You see me rocking my Huga House all the time here on the show. If you want to get the hat that I wear all the time, or any of the hats that Aaron Rodgers wearing, Shane Gillis, Shohei Ohtani, many athletes and celebrities rock the Huga House apparel, rock the Huga House vintage-inspired hats. If you want to get yourself a hat, click the link in the description down below. That'll take you to the Huga House store. Use promo code BUBS for 15% off any purchase at Huga House. Get yourself some swag. Get yourself some of the same swag that QB1 Aaron Rodgers wears all the time. Once again, promo code BUBS for 15% off your purchase. All right, now let's get into today's episode and today's preview. I'll try and be short and sweet with this since I'm not in my usual studio and the audio might not sound great. So apologize, trying to do the best I can here. Again, we'll be back in my studio on Sunday and next week and all that good stuff with more daily content. But the Jets play the Commanders tomorrow afternoon, 12 Eastern, at MetLife Stadium. For those of you who care, there are some betting odds on this one. Commanders come into this one 2.5-point favorites, so the Jets are the plus 2.5-point dogs. Over-under set at 34.5. And weather right now, while it's been very, very stormy in the New York, New Jersey tri-state area, it seems like it might actually hold off for tomorrow, which would be a positive thing to try and evaluate some of the depth on this roster. Obviously, it was a very, very rainy joint practice. And before we get into the actual game, I do want to give some of my quick takeaways on the joint practice. I know I didn't have an episode out on that. Look, the Aaron Rodgers stuff was obviously not out there for joint practice. That's not a big deal. Sal's trying to protect him. It makes sense. Jets are trying to win games in September, October, November, December, January, so on and so forth. They're not, August. You don't win games in August. You win games during the season when it actually matters. A joint practice on August 8th does not make sense to risk your Hall of Fame quarterback coming off a torn Achilles on a wet surface, slipping, falling, hurting himself, and having to miss time. So I totally understand that decision. In terms of some of the top performers, I mean, man, Garrett Wilson had a day. Even without Rodgers, he was absolutely cooking Emmanuel Forbes out there, just dominating and legitimately showing you how dangerous he can be with just competent quarterback play. I mean, it wasn't even Rodgers throwing to him. It was Tyrod Taylor. Just imagine if Tyrod had been the Jets quarterback the last 2 years, what Garrett Wilson can do. So it was good to see him against some another team and against a cornerback in Emmanuel Forbes who's not on Sauce Gardner's level, and Garrett Wilson. It shows you how much better those two guys get from going up against each other, and he absolutely dominated. So that was a really big positive. Will McDonald had a really solid day, which I think was a positive if you're a New York Jets fan. He's had a very interesting camp so far, very interesting season coming up here. Massive season for Will McDonald. It's been very interesting to see how the fan base is kind of split. They're all kind of reacting differently to his weight, his play, the expectations. So good to see that Will McDonald pretty much dominated. I mean, it was all over the place yesterday, racking up a couple what would be sacks. Spin move athleticism was on full display. That's exactly what you want to see. Can that continue into the regular season? Can that continue against some of the league's best tackles? We'll see. But a really positive yesterday to see him go out there and dominate against a team in a different uniform. The offensive line was solid. Joe Tippmann, I thought, had a decent, was solid. You want to see, of course, more of him here throughout the rest of the training camp, throughout the rest of preseason games and stuff like that. But all in all, a pretty positive day for the offense, pretty positive day for the defense. The Jets dominated the Commanders yesterday, and that hasn't happened much over the last couple of years. I mean, you even go back and look at last year when the Jets went into Carolina and faced the Panthers in joint practice. We were all kind of just chalking it up to, oh, it's early on. We've got Rodgers. It doesn't matter. But the Jets got dominated by the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers beat the Jets in those joint practices. And that was embarrassing looking at, in the grand scheme of things, when you come to find out what the Carolina Panthers actually were last year. It's been a while since the Jets were legitimately dominating another team in joint practice. And yesterday that was the case, where they were clearly the better team by a mile against a rebuilding and younger Washington Commanders team, especially with Jaden Daniels, of course, who will make his debut tomorrow afternoon. So just some of my quick joint practice thoughts from yesterday, as the Jets now have a day off and they will head into the game tomorrow. So now into the actual preview. Jets Commanders, of course, tomorrow afternoon, 12 Eastern, MetLife Stadium. Jets home to open things up here in preseason. The starting quarterbacks for this one, as of right now, it hasn't been confirmed who will start for the New York Jets. Saleh spoke to the media yesterday after the joint practice, didn't say anything on it, wasn't really asked about it. And then today there, of course, was no practice, so there was no media. So we really don't know. There is no official starting quarterback for the Jets, although we can only assume that it's probably going to be Tyrod Taylor for a drive or two. And I think that's a positive because you want to evaluate some of this depth. You want to evaluate some of these guys fighting for roster spots. And the best way to do that is with Tyrod Taylor out there, as opposed to Andrew Peasley starting games or starting the game and playing early on, where some of these other depth guys that you want to see. Tyrod's competent. He can run the offense. Usually offense is pretty sloppy to open up preseason. So to have a guy that's been there, done that, can run the offense a little bit, it'll help from a evaluation standpoint if the Jets have a veteran like him out there. So I'm going to assume it's going to be Tyrod to open things up, probably for a drive or two. And then you'll get Peasley and Martinez pretty much the rest of the way with, of course, Rodgers not playing. And then, of course, Jordan Travis still out, and we'll see if he even plays at all this preseason, but we all know that. So it's going to be pretty much Tyrod for probably a drive or two, I'd assume, maybe the first quarter, and then Peasley and Martinez, it'll be their show the rest of the way. As for the Commanders, we know it's going to be Jaden Daniels, which will be exciting, I think, for any NFL fan. Number 2 overall pick will be out there, so that'll be fun to see, even though it's not the Jets' starting defense. The Jets' depth is extremely talented. We know how deep this team is, especially on defense, so they'll get a really good test against Jaden Daniels, a top prospect, to start things tomorrow. And we also saw the Jets took care of business pretty well against Jaden Daniels in the joint practice, so that was a positive there as well. The starting defense, I think Daniels was 8 of 15 or something. Really wasn't a very, very good day for him. The Jets are pretty much all over him and all over the Commanders on both sides of the football. So it'll be fun to watch the depth tomorrow against Daniels in his first NFL game environment. So that's something that a lot of NFL fans should be interested in, to see what a number 2 overall pick looks like in his first in-game action. How long he plays, who knows, we'll see. But those, I'd assume, are the starting quarterbacks. Now, I'll try and get through these as kind of quickly as I can here. Again, not my usual spot, so try and keep it short and sweet. As for the top players to watch in this one, start with a lot of the rookies, right? Olu Fashanu. You're not going to get Morgan Moses. You're not going to get Tyron Smith out there. You might not get him out there at all this preseason, other than if the Jets use the Giants game as a ramp up for week 1 and Rodgers and all the starters play a drive or two. But you're not going to see really any of the starters. Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall. You're not going to see Rodgers, of course. Defensively, too, you're not going to see many of the starters. Sauce, DJ Reed, Michael Carter, Jermaine Johnson, Quinn. You're not going to see any of those guys. Mosley, Quincy Williams. It's preseason. Those guys really don't play. So for the offensive line, it's up to, Olu Fashanu will get a really good opportunity throughout the entirety of this preseason. You expect him to play games this year because the health of Tyron Smith is a factor, and he will probably not play all 17 games. That would be great if he does, but being realistic, he's not going to play all 17 games. Olu Fashanu will probably play at least 3-4 games this year, maybe even more than that, depending on the health of Morgan Moses as well and how they, how the rest of the offensive line looks. So Olu Fashanu will get in-game action this year, but before that, you want to see him out there in-game action in a live NFL environment. So getting to see him throughout these first 3 preseason games will be invaluable. The opportunity for him to play in these games, get reps, and also be able to learn, of course, from Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses and all those guys still is huge. So Olu Fashanu, first game out there, starting at left tackle. That would be what I assume will happen tomorrow. He's a guy to watch for. He's definitely a name to watch for throughout the rest of camp. He had a pretty good day yesterday at joint practices, and he looked out to continue here in all these preseason games. As for some others, Malachi Corley, another one. Rookie, has come along recently here in camp with Xavier Gipson out as a really, really solid couple practices over the last week and a half. A couple days he's dominated, so getting to see him out there working with Tyrod, in-game action, I think getting to see his physicality, his running style, his play style as a whole in a game environment is going to be really beneficial, I think, for evaluating him, because this is a guy, the way he plays, it's tough to gauge what he's doing, how he's doing in training camp, because they don't really tackle. This is a guy that's physical. This is a guy that breaks tackles. This is a guy that has the ability to pick up an immense amount of yards after the catch. He's the yak king. You can't always tell that in camp because plays are usually dead. Once they kind of get wrapped up, they, call the play dead. So getting to see him in an in-game environment will be really beneficial for fans, will be really beneficial for the Jets to evaluate where he is early in his NFL career so far before the season begins. Other guys to look out for. Braylon Allen get a lot of reps early in this game with Breece Hall not playing. Isaiah Davis as well. 2 rookies. Braylon Allen's a guy I'm really looking forward to for the same reasons Malachi Corley. Not only is he a rookie and you want to see what rookies look like in their first live game action, but also he's got that same style. Downhill, physical runner. Tough to tell sometimes how well he's doing in camp because they're not really tackling you. They're not really bringing you down. Plays are all the time called dead early. So getting to see him in in-game action where he can actually break tackles and extend plays and, just go up the middle and turn what looks like maybe a 1-2 yard gain into 6-7 yards with lowering his shoulder and using his pure strength. That'll be something to certainly look forward to. And Braylon Allen, to be honest, we've seen that a lot so far actually already in camp. I mean, he stuffed Tony Adams the one day into the ground. He pretty much decked him, trucked him is the right word to use there. So he's a guy that I think all Jets fans should be really, really excited about, even though it's only preseason. As for some other guys in offense, Jeremy Ruckert, Kenny Yeboah, all those guys are names that I would look out for, especially Ruckert. He's put together a very strong camp. Seeing him out there in in-game action, his route running, his pass catching ability, I think will be really, really good if he puts together a really strong camp. I talked about Jeremy Ruckert a ton before training camp started and even during camp. How he looks in joint practices and how he looks in preseason games will be so important for Jets fans having confidence that he can be a legitimate number 2 complement to Tyler Conklin, and also give Jets fans confidence that if Conklin doesn't remain a Jet after the season because he hits the open market, that Jeremy Ruckert can at least be your number 1 tight end moving forward. So these games, these reps, while it won't be many, but in these preseason games and the joint practices are huge for Jeremy Ruckert, so he's a name to look out for as well. Not that he's fighting for a roster spot, but you would like to see him make consistent progress from where he's been through his first 2 years in the league. And that's pretty much it offensively. Another name too, Joe Tippmann, a guy that we know the snap problems are a problem. Seemed like they got a little bit better yesterday at joint practice. You would like to see him go out there, and I would assume he plays. I don't know if he will. We have no real confirmation on who is playing. Saleh really hasn't commented, but I would assume they would try to get him out there. I think it would be smart to try and resolve these snap issues in game, because it's one thing if you can resolve them during camp or get better during camp. It's another thing in an in-game environment. I know it's preseason. I know it doesn't matter, but still, it's in-game. The speed's different. It's totally different from practice. So I would like to see Tippmann out there personally. I don't know if he will, but if he is, he's a name to watch. The snaps are a big, big storyline. You would like to see those get ironed out here over the next couple weeks and continue to hopefully improve from where they were about a week ago, where he had that one practice where he snapped about a half dozen over Rodgers' head. It seems like they've been getting slightly better, but still not to the point where I think you have a ton of confidence if you're a Jet fan. So seeing him out there, I think, would be good for evaluation perspective. There's a couple other position battles that I'll get to later on involving the offense, but I'll get to those later. Some other players to watch. Corners, Quantez Stiggers, Jarek Bernard-Converse, two guys that have put together very strong camps. JBC, since making the transition from safety to corner, has been excellent. He's put together some really, really positive practices. He's a name to look out for, not only for this year, but for the future. Quantez Stiggers, another name. He has been amazing so far. Of course, an amazing story. Comes in here as a 5th-round pick, 176th overall. Has been great during camp. Now you got to strap him up, go out there in a in-game environment. Really interested to see if Quantez Stiggers carries what he has done during camp so far in a live game scenario. So those are two names I'm really looking forward to seeing out there tomorrow, Stiggers and JBC. Two guys that are depth this year at cornerback, but with the way contracts look, Michael Carter, of course, DJ Reed, I'd assume they retain one of those guys. Those are more discussions for down the road, but JBC or Quantez Stiggers could maybe be starting next year. Even Brandon Eccles is another name as well, depending on what that cornerback room looks like. So positive things for those guys goes a long way here from a future perspective outlook from this Jet team. Some edge rushers, we'll talk more about this soon with the way the defensive line looks, but Eric Watts, Braden McGregor, two UDFAs that I'm really looking forward to seeing. Two guys have flashed a little bit here in camp. Jalen Holmes, another guy. Every year it feels like, last year he put together a very, very productive camp. This season he's putting together a very productive camp. It feels like this guy is always a training camp darling, but seeing him out there in preseason will be good. Tack McKinley's another name to look out for as well. He's put together one of the best camps, I think, up front for the Jets, depth-wise. So he'll get out there, excited to see what he can do. And then even Leonard Taylor, another UDFA in the interior, fighting for a roster spot as well. Couple UDFAs that'll get a lot of play time here over the next 3 weeks. That'll be really, really interesting to watch and really interesting to see how these final depth pieces on the defensive line end up panning out for this Jets team. Just some other guys to look out for. Zaire Barnes, Jamian Sherwood. Sherwood's been excellent this camp. This might be his strongest camp yet. He looks, I think, the best he has ever looked since the Jets took him out of Auburn. A really, really exciting piece, not only for this year, but for the future as well, as maybe a future replacement for CJ Mosley or whatnot. We'll see, but a 5th-round pick turned safety really feels like he's kind of coming to his own this year so far in camp. So seeing him out there tomorrow will be good. Zaire Barnes, Chaz Surratt, two guys. You got some guys fighting for those final linebacker spots, even Sammy Guabon. So there's a couple, if they hold 4 linebackers, who's going to make it? It's the top 3 of Quincy, CJ, Sherwood. And then is it Barnes? Is it Surratt? Is it Guabon? So some linebacker depth there that has to still be ironed out, that the game should tell you a lot more on who might make the roster out of those spots. Mystery relevant Jalen Key, another guy too to look out for. And then Will McDonald is a big one as well. He's a big one. He's going to get a lot of reps. He's going to get a good amount of opportunities. A good joint practice yesterday. It's kind of been an up and down camp for him. You hear that he didn't put on a ton of weight. Some fans are weary. I kind of stand on that side. I don't have a ton of optimism for Will McDonald, but the athleticism, the burst off the line, it's all there. I have questions about the strength, but hey, he had a dominant joint practice yesterday. If he can go out there and impress a little bit in some of these preseason games, I think you should have a lot of confidence if you're a fan like me who is still needs to see more out of Will McDonald before I fully buy in. But we'll see. That's what the preseason's all about, trying to prove yourself a little bit more before the regular season begins. Now let's get into some battles and then just some more position players, and then we'll close things out here. As for battles, running back 4 with Tariq Cohen gone it seems like now it's a 2-man race. It felt like it was a 3-man race, and this would be a battle that was really interesting to watch if Tariq Cohen was still here, because it would be Cohen, Izzy, and Valladay. Now it's just Izzy and Valladay, and I doubt the New York Jets cut Izzy. So Izzy's going to have to impress. I still think Izzy's going to have to be productive here in the preseason, but for that fourth running back spot, it feels like now it's just a two-man race between Izzy and Valladay. So seeing what those two guys can do, if Valladay goes out there, a couple catches and a touchdown, he certainly boosts his value, but that's a competition to look out for, especially now without Tariq Cohen. It's a little bit less of a competition because I doubt they gave Xavier and Valladay a 53-man roster spot over Izzy Abanaconda, but you never know. I think Izzy will make the roster now, but it's still something to look for as running back 4. And even your 6th receiver. Look, your 5 are set, right? You got Garrett Wilson. You got Mike Williams, who just was activated, of course, off PUP list, which is great. Xavier Gibson, Alan Lazar, Malachi Corley. Those are your 5 main ones. Not in any particular order, just named them off the top of my head. Then you get to your 6th receiver, and it's kind of between Jason Brownlee. You have Malik Taylor. You have Irvin Charles. Even a guy like Lance McCutcheon, to a lesser extent, I would say. I don't think he has a great chance to make the roster. I still think it's going to be Jason Brownlee. After a slow start to camp, Jason Brownlee has really come on and has put together a very, very strong training camp. So he's a name that I would like to see continue this positive momentum that he's put together in practices to preseason games as well. Him and Gibson were both guys that impressed last year in the preseason. I think if he flashes again in the preseason, that'll definitely secure his spot. It'll be interesting because Irv Charles, of course, is a threat on special teams. So I think the Jets will still find a way to get him on the roster as a special teams piece. I think Brownlee will make it. I think the odd man out will probably be Malik Taylor. But it's still a competition to look out for, depending on all these training camp preseason performances. It's something to see how it develops. But wide receiver 6 is another spot that I'm interested to see. I still think Brownlee probably has the inside track there, especially if he can continue what has been mostly a very, very positive training camp for him this summer. Defensively, defensive line depth's big. I have already talked about it a little bit. You got Jermaine Johnson, Javon Kinlaw, Quinnen Williams, Hassan Reddick. Right? I know he's still holding out, but once Reddick comes back, hopefully, we'll see. I don't know. But Hassan Reddick, Will McDonald, Lecky Fotu, Solomon Thomas, Michael Clemens. Those are kind of your 8 guys that are set on this team. Michael Clemens has been getting first-team reps. We'll see if he plays tomorrow. If he does, he's an interesting name to look out for because he's been getting a lot of reps so far in camp, which I don't necessarily agree with. But if he can go out there and even perform in the preseason games, the Jets obviously see something in him. I don't quite, but we'll see. Those are your 8 guys. After that, you kind of have questions. If they're going to hold 10 defensive linemen, who are the next 2? Those are your 8. Do you hang on to a Tandell Smart? Is it, an Eric Watts, a Jalen Holmes, a Tack McKinley, a Braden McGregor, a Leonard Taylor? Who then do you hold on to? So it feels like there's like 5 players fighting for 2 spots when it comes to the defensive line and the depth there. It feels like 8 guys are guaranteed to make the roster on the defensive line, and then there's like 2 open spots if they hold on to 10, and there's like 5 players competing for that. So will they take another edge? Will they hold on to the Tandell Smart? Will they, roll with the Leonard Taylor? Have they seen enough from him, the Miami UDFA? So defensive line depth is something to definitely watch for. And it was something to watch for last year, and it's something to watch for again this year as we hit live preseason games starting tomorrow. Offensive line depth, same thing. Your starting 5. Your depth, Olu Fashanu and Carter Warren. Those are 7. I would assume Max Mitchell makes the roster. I would say Wes Schweitzer makes the roster. That's 9. After that, what happens? Do the Jets go out and maybe sign a Connor McGovern? There you have 10. Who knows? We'll see. But you've even got like guys like Cole Laval. You've got guys like Chris Glazer, Jake Hansen, Brady Latham. Those guys that are kind of fighting for those last 1 or 2 spots on the offensive line. So that's something to keep an eye on. It might not mean anything in the long run because if the Jets, let's say, go out and sign Connor McGovern, he would probably be your 10th offensive lineman anyway because you would have your starting 5 and your depth would be Fashanu, Carter Warren, Wes Schweitzer, Max Mitchell, and you'd probably have McGovern. And Schweitzer's kind of your do-it-all, can play every single position. McGovern's your backup center. Your swing tackle's Carter Warren pretty much. And then, of course, Olu Fashanu is your backup to Tyron Smith, who might get right tackle reps, but as of now is strictly just a left tackle. Of course, your first-round pick. So we'll see, but it's something to look out for. And this isn't a position battle, but just going back to the tight ends, Yeboah always performs well in preseason games, so we'll see if he can continue that tomorrow. And I would also say this: Zach Kuntz has actually put together a nice camp, and it's interesting because last year, of course, he kind of came in. It felt like he was really raw. It felt like he was really just not a tight end yet, not an NFL-ready tight end. You remember Hard Knocks when he ran the wrong route, scored a touchdown against the Panthers. I feel like so far in camp, he's actually impressed. It feels like he's an actual tight end now. It feels like he is more of it feels like he's a little bit more ready than he was last year. Last year, it felt like he was super athletic, but really, really, he was like, had a lot of talent, but needed to be kind of brought in a little bit. And it feels like this year so far in camp, he's impressed. It seems like he is a little bit more of a well-rounded tight end. I don't know how much he'll actually play in the games. Probably not a ton if he's your fourth option, with it probably being Conklin, Rucker, Yeboah. But I think if Kuntz can show you a little bit more here in the preseason games, I think that's a positive. So he's a name to look out for. Not so much battling for a position, but just tight end depth, of course, outside of Conklin's really interesting. So that's pretty much it. That's mainly it. I'll say Jets win 13-10. It'll be a low-scoring game. Offenses in preseason football are usually pretty ugly. I will see when the recap comes out. It'll probably be Sunday morning. Maybe something gets out tomorrow night, but most likely it'll be Sunday morning where I will recap this game and give you all my biggest takeaways. But until then, stay tuned. As always, until next time, Jets, 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 Jets.